Hi everyone. Today we are going to be working with conditional statements in Python. So if you're ready, let's get started. Okay, so we are going to be working with conditional statements today. So first of all, let's figure out what conditional statements are. So a conditional statement is basically an if-else statement. So an if-else statement is just checking for a condition in Python. If-else statements aren't unique to Python. They're in almost every programming language. The Python syntax is a little bit different than C++ or JavaScript, but for me at least, it's a little bit more intuitive. Today we'll be also talking about indentation blocks in Python, which is a very important aspect of Python's readability. So let's open up Visual Studio Code and get started. So once you open up Visual Studio Code, you can navigate to the Python folder that we created. I deleted hello-world.py, which is the Python file we've been developing on, because that was just some initial tests and making sure the setup was correct, as well as the print function variables, just the introductory sort of stuff. So now we're going to be working with conditional statements, which are if-else statements, basically. Those are the basic conditional statements. There are some others that you'll learn as you get more and more advanced in Python, but for today, we'll stick with three statements: if, else, and elif. So once you open up VS Code, navigate to your Python folder. I'll just clear my terminal in order to, let me make this full screen. So in order to get that integrated terminal, just click on Terminal, New Terminal, and this should pop up either on the bottom or on the right. So once you have that set, you can just click over here for a new file. Remember, all our Python files have to be called something.py, so they have to end with that .py extension, just so that our computer knows that the code within that file is in Python. So we will just call this conditional.py because we are working with conditional statements. And let's start with just a variable so that we understand how this works. So with the variables, they all have data types, if you remember. So let's say x equals 10. So pop quiz, what type of variable is x, or what type of data does x contain? Okay, so it's going to be an integer, right? X is an integer because 10 is a number. So we call that an integer. And if you're kind of confused about data types or variables in general, then go watch my previous video, which covers just the print function, variables, and data types, basically, and some basic operators. So x equals 10, and this is the condition we want to check with our statement. So we check if x is equivalent to 10. We want to, let's say, print x is 10. Let's just go with this. So this is the if statement. It just says if x is equivalent to 10, print x is equal to 10. I'll explain what each of the words in this phrase basically does, but first let's run it to make sure everything is working correctly. So we do Python 3 conditional.py, and we get x is 10 printed out, which is what we want. So we know this is working. What we can do additionally is add an else statement. But before we do that, let's understand what an if statement does. Okay, so if x is equivalent to 10, that's this first line. You can see if just checks, is x equivalent to 10? The reason you have these double equals is because you're checking. And this is a slightly more advanced topic, but in Python, you can have either a single equal sign or a double equal sign. So a single equal sign is called the assignment operator. Again, if you're confused with operators, go watch the previous video in the playlist, Python Basics. But x equals 10 is assigning the value 10 to x. But if you're checking if x is equivalent to 10, then you're not assigning 10 again to x. You're just checking if x is equivalent to 10. And in order to differentiate between assignment and checking, you put that double equals if you're checking and a single equals if you're assigning. That's the difference. So if x is equivalent to 10, and then you put this colon. What this colon sign does is says any code below this colon and also indented is going to basically be run only if x is equivalent to 10. So only if x equals 10, print x is 10. Now, if you bring this back and don't put that indentation, then it's going to throw you an error. If you have the linter installed, it will give you that squiggly line underneath with red. But I recently had to delete my linter just because it was causing some problems. But if you just run it, it shouldn't run. So it basically says indentation error expected an indented block. What that means is it's expecting some sort of indentation right here to show that if x is equivalent to 10, print whatever's indented and below it. Now, if we say print x is 10, and then say print hello, right? This right here will run, hello will be printed even if x is not equal to 10. So if we try that once more, right there, it says x is 10 and then hello. But if we change this to 11, you try the same thing, it still prints out hello right there. And the reason for that is because it's not indented. We're not saying only if x is equivalent to 10, print hello. So if we run this again, since we indented it, it's not going to run. It's just going to skip straight past this if statement, which we can collapse right here. So none of this runs because x is not equal to 10. Okay, so now what do we say if x is equivalent to 10? Do this, but how do we say if x is not equal to 10? So one way is to put another if statement. And the way you say not equal to is this exclamation and then equal to. Right? And then if x is not equal to 10, then just print x is not 10. So this is what should be running. Yeah, x is not 10 because we set x equivalent to 11. But there's a simpler way to do this, and that's using the else statement. So you're saying if x is equivalent to 10, print x is 10, and we can delete this. I just have a fly over here. Okay, print x is 10, and then else, if x is not equal to 10, if x is any other value but 10, print x is not 10. So right now, since we assigned x to 11 and we run the Python file, it says x is not 10. It triggers that else statement. So the way Python works, it goes from the top, says x is equivalent to 11. If x is equivalent to 10, then you print x is 10. And if x is not equal to 10, which is that else condition, then you say print x is not 10. So that's the basics of conditional logic, if and else. So it's like a switching operator. It's checking whether one condition is true, and if it is true, execute something. If it's not true, execute something else. Okay, there's one last function in conditionals that you should know because it is quite important. Because what if we say if x is 10, print x is 10, but if x is 11, print x is 11, and then else, if it's not 10 or 11, then you print x is not 10 or 11. So in order to do that simple problem, you can say elif x equals 11, print x is 11, and then else, print x is not 10 or 11. So right now, what should get triggered? Well, that elif statement should get triggered because an elif is just an additional if, basically. It's just like saying this, except an elif makes sure that this if is still connected to this else. Or else, if you just had if x is not 11, if x is 10, then this would run. So that's why you need that elif, and we'll try both ways. So if you have that elif, you can see it prints out x is 11. But let's say we remove it. Let's say it's just another if statement, just stacked on there. Whoops, I closed my terminal. There we go. And now if you run it, it says x is 11, right? Elif just makes sure that you have that sort of understanding that all three of these are together. Another important thing to note is that your if statement does not have to be accompanied by an else, right? For example, if you just want to check if x is 10, then you could just write this. You don't need to have an else condition, and you can't leave this else condition just blank because it will say indentation error. So if you close this, this is perfectly fine. So if you don't need an else statement, you don't need to tack it on. You just need that if statement. So that's basically all it is for this video. That's the basics of conditional logic in Python: if, elif, and else. So I'll see you in the next one.